Summer Game Fest 2026 is over. The trailers have been uploaded. Every gaming YouTuber has already posted their reaction. Twitter has spent the last 24 hours arguing on whether Jeff Keighley saved gaming or personally ruined it. So now that we've all had a chance to sleep on it, let's talk about what was actually shown. I think this is one of the best Summer Game Fest we've had in a long while. Not perfect, not quite E3 2015 levels, but good. For the first time in years, I finished one of Jeff's showcases and immediately started making a list of games I actually wanted to play, instead of a list of games I'd forgotten 5 minutes later. There were still some CGI trailers, there were still some announcements that didn't really do much for me. But overall, the show had a strong mix of horror, RPGs, action games, strategy games, surprises, and long-awaited reveals. And by the end of the show, I landed on a pretty comfortable score. But let's talk about the games. So, Resident Evil Veronica, or what is essentially Capcom finally giving fans a Code Veronica remake they've been asking for since Resident Evil 2 remake launched. It's about bloody time. This is probably the most requested Resident Evil remake ever. Every single time Capcom announced something new, people immediately asked, cool, but where's Code Veronica? Now we know. And what immediately stood out to me was the atmosphere. The trailer had this dark, moodier feel than I expected. Claire Redfield looks fantastic, the visuals are absurd, the RE engine continues to perform actual witchcraft, and more importantly, this feels like the final piece of the remake puzzle. RE2, RE3, RE4, and now Veronica. At this point, Capcom are basically incapable of missing, which is incredibly annoying if you're every other publisher. Then we got Alien Isolation 2, a massive surprise. The original Alien Isolation came out over a decade ago, and somehow it's still one of the scariest games ever made, not because it's relied on cheap jump scares, not because it threw 20 monsters at you every 5 minutes, because it understood tension. That xenomorph wasn't a scripted enemy, it was basically an intelligent nightmare. The reveal trailer immediately captured that same energy, a new colony, a new setting, a new hunting ground for the alien. My only concern is, please don't turn this into an action game. The second I see purple loot and RPG skill trees, I'm going to start sweating. Keep it terrifying, keep it stressful, and keep me hiding in lockers questioning my life choices. Then Jeff closed the show with Final Fantasy VII Revelation. What a way to end things. This trilogy has become one of the most ambitious remake projects gaming has ever attempted. The scale looked ridiculous, the environments looked huge, and the visuals looked incredible. The Highwind reveal alone probably caused several Final Fantasy fans to temporarily leave their physical bodies. And now we're finally approaching the conclusion. The pressure on Square Enix is enormous because now they actually have to finish the story. If they nail the ending, this trilogy becomes legendary. If they don't, Final Fantasy fans are going to be completely normal and reasonable about it. Obviously. One announcement that genuinely surprised me was Cuphead. Not only are we getting a proper sequel, we're also getting Mighty Cuphead Adventure. This feels like one of the smartest announcements of the entire show, because Cuphead is one of the rare indie games that became bigger than most AAA franchises. The art style remains incredible, the animation still looks impossible, and somehow Studio MDHR continue making everything look handcrafted. The spin-off looked faster, more platforming focused, and while the sequel announcement basically guaranteed every Cuphead fan immediately started screaming, the only downside, we're probably all going to suffer through another generation of brutally difficult bosses. Fantastic. Can't wait for it. Now let's talk about Stranger Than Heaven, formerly Project Century. And honestly, every single time this game appears, I become more and more interested. The setting looks incredible, the atmosphere looks incredible, the presentation is dripping with style, and they casually decided to include Snoop Dogg and fucking Tupac. What the hell's going on there then? Which was not on my Summer Game Fest bingo card at all. I don't think it was on anyone's. The entire project feels different, and that's exactly why it stands out. So many modern games blend together. This does not. Every trailer leaves me with more questions than answers, which is honestly the best kind of marketing. Blood Message might be one of the most underrated reveals of the entire show. Visually, it looked fantastic. The world looked gorgeous. And the combat looked brutal, and more importantly, it felt like something we don't get enough of anymore. A completely fresh IP trying to make a statement. Gaming desperately needs more of that. Not everything needs to be a sequel, not everything needs to be a remake, sometimes you just need a new idea. Blood Message immediately grabbed my attention, now we just need to see more gameplay. On to TMNT. This is another one that got me extremely excited, because The Last Ronin is probably the coolest thing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has done in years. The comic is darker, more mature, more emotional, and honestly it's exactly the kind of story that deserves a serious game adaptation. The footage looks promising, the tone looked right, and if they can nail the combat and storytelling, this could become the best TMNT game ever made. That's a lot of pressure, but the potential is absolutely there. Capcom wasn't finished yet. Of course they weren't. Monster Hunter Wilds Ascendance showed exactly why Monster Hunter is becoming one of the biggest franchises in gaming. The new monsters looked fantastic, the environments looked beautiful, and the expansions already feels larger than some full games. The only thing funnier than Monster Hunter's success is remembering there was a time people thought the series would never become mainstream in the West. Now it's one of Capcom's biggest franchises. Then all of a sudden, Guild Wars 3. This was one of those moments where MMA fans completely lost their minds, because Guild Wars 3 has basically been gaming folklore at this point. People have been speculating about it for years, and now it's real. The challenge is obvious. MMOs are incredibly difficult to launch successfully. The market is damn near brutal. Players expect everything immediately, but if ArenaNet can capture what made Guild Wars special while modernizing the formula, this could be massive. One of the more unexpected reveals was Stellar Blade Blood Rain, and this feels like a shift up, doubling down on everything people loved about the first game. More action, more spectacle, more insane combat, and from what we saw, this looks less like a small follow-up and more like a full evolution of the original concept. Star Wars Zero Company. This might actually be one of the smartest Star Wars projects in development, because instead of another action game, instead of another open world, instead of another lightsaber simulator, we're getting something different, a strategy-focused Star Wars game. That universe is perfect for it. The setting looked interesting, and it's refreshing to see Star Wars experimenting again. Blood of the Dawnwalker continues to impress. Every time I see Blood of the Dawnwalker, I become more convinced this could be one of the biggest RPG surprises in years. Former Witcher developers, dark fantasy setting, vampire themes, meaningful choices. It's basically engineered to get RPG fans interested. The world looks fantastic, the concept is unique, and the ambition is obvious. Now they just need to deliver. Now I actually like parts of Lords of the Fallen, but let's be honest, the first game had issues, performance issues, balance issues, technical issues, and basically everything issues. So Lords of the Fallen 2 has an opportunity. Take the good ideas, fix the problems, deliver the game people wanted the first time round, because the foundation is there. Now they just need to execute. But after all the announcements, after all the trailers, after all the reveals, there was one game I kept coming back to: The Wolf Among Us 2. Oh, man, I can't fucking believe it. They finally dropped it after so long. I wasn't expecting that. Resident Evil Veronica was the biggest reveal, and Alien Isolation 2 was probably my favourite surprise. Final Fantasy VII Revelation looked incredible, but The Wolf Among Us 2 was the game that stayed with me, because we've been waiting for this forever. It feels like a game from another era. We've seen Telltale collapse, we've seen Telltale come back, we've seen delays after delays after delays, and somehow this game is still alive. Seeing it again felt surreal, and what I love most is it still looks like The Wolf Among Us. It still has that same atmosphere, that style, that identity. Big B remains one of the coolest protagonists in gaming. The Fables universe remains one of the most unique settings in gaming, and after all these years, I still desperately want to know what happens next. That's why this was my game of the show, not because it was the biggest or the flashiest, but because it felt personal. Summer Game Fest 2026 wasn't perfect. There were too many CGI trailers, a few forgettable announcements. Some games still need to show more gameplay, but overall, this was one of Jeff Keighley's best showcases. Resident Evil Veronica delivered. Alien Isolation 2 shocked everyone. Final Fantasy VII Revelation looked enormous. Cuphead fans won 100%. Guild Wars 3 finally happened. Star Wars Zero Company impressed, and The Wolf Among Us 2 completely stole my goddamn heart. For me, Summer Games Fest 26 gets a very comfortable 8 out of 10. A genuinely great showcase. And now the pressure shifts to Xbox. Let's see if they can top it.